How often do you find yourself struggling with in-cockpit controls? Well, this little device might just change things. It's basically a plug-and-play cockpit control module that goes far beyond the standard radio functionality that the name might suggest. Designed for GA aircraft enthusiasts and those flying larger jets on VATSIM or Pilot Edge, it's perfect for both VFR and IFR flying. But radios are just the beginning when it comes to this, and it's got a few tricks up its sleeve. Virtual Fly did send the Switcho's Radios unit through for testing and review, but have no input on what goes into this video. So we have two versions of the Switcho Radios, the Standard Edition and the E Edition. The E Edition is simply a paid upgrade after the fact that adds an extra flight display that you can swipe to. There's no hardware difference here, both versions are exactly the same in that respect, it's just a software upgrade. And you can purchase the Standard Edition or the E Edition at the checkout, or simply upgrade your Standard Edition for the extra EFIS display that it delivers. I think it's like €50 upgrade or something, but we'll get to the price a little bit later in the video. Before we move on to the feature set, I need to explain to you that you can remove the extrusion style casing using the 6 screws on the outside, and then just install it into the cutout that you see on the dash that I've got on my flight simulator. So throughout the video you're going to see this in both of those situations, standalone and integrated into the dash. So what can the Switcho Radios do? Because it's more than just a radio panel. To start off, you've got this high resolution touchscreen up here, and it doesn't need an HDMI cable. It runs on its own hardware and software. The screen is 1024 by 600 pixels. Now that does sound a little bit low, but based on the dimensions of 160 by 90 millimeters, the pixel density is really quite high. So it's very sharp for a little monitor. It does, however, have an overly reflective screen. I didn't have any issues, although I sim in a fairly dim room. Now, everything from your autopilot to your radio information is displayed on this screen. You have your comm radios, nav radios, your ADF and your transponder, and these are all controlled by these rotary knobs below. All the rotaries have a push function which will alter the button state. A good example might be to switch from COM 1 to COM 2, you just push in the rotary knob. Then we have the autopilot panel. Now you've got 4 knobs here, all with push function. CRS 1 and 2, which tie back to your nav radios. Then your heading and your gyro, again pushing the knob to switch between both. Then your altitude, which you can hold and turn to move 1,000 feet at a time, or just turn for 100-foot increments. Looking at all the buttons available, it's very much well set up to fly a wide variety of GA aircraft, and it flirts with some bigger jets too. You have all your standard buttons like your heading mode, nav, VNav, vertical speed, flight level change, autopilot on and off. It's all a fully functioning autopilot system. You also have a button for activating or deactivating a yaw damper if your plane has one. There's also auto throttle function here too, which demonstrates that this little unit really is stretching its legs in terms of what can be flown with it. I think the best way to understand all the functions here is to have a look at the user manual. It goes well beyond this surface level information I'm giving you and basically explains every single function. Check out the link in the description. Moving on, we can look at some other parts of the display. And the one that stands out for me is the trim and the flap indicators. The indicators are clear and well laid out. It will also show you when your gear is in transition. You might already have noticed this, but this unit also has a swipe down audio panel. Again, the same sort of functions that you might see on the likes of a G1000. Your comms audio, your nav, you can mute the marker beacon. This is starting to get pretty deep. I'm keen to hear from anyone that would make good use of this audio panel. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you would use. The next cool feature is being able to switch through the HSI source by simply tapping on the screen through your nav 1, nav 2 and GPS. I thought that was pretty neat. And finally, we have the annunciator panel. There's a heap of different warnings that will pop up here, like master warning, flap overspeed, low fuel, pressure, oil temperature, and gear unsafe. I think there's about 27 or 28 all in. These are all listed in the instruction manual, so again, anyone remotely interested in this product, I highly recommend that you take a look through that. I'll briefly touch on the software here too. I'm not going to say much about it because it's just like one click and you're up and running. It's really that simple. For such an in-depth product, it just works. Make sure you do go through the correct procedure to switching it on though, and this is detailed in the manual. Now you might remember I talked about the upgraded version at the start of the video, the E version. Well, this will allow you to swipe left and give you a full G1000-esque display that will work with single and twin engine jets, piston and turboprop planes. From your engine display to your glide slope indicator, it's all there. So based on everything here, this is probably the most feature-rich, or at least one of the most feature-rich pieces of equipment I've ever tried. It just does so much, but we do need to address the build quality. Overall build quality is excellent in every aspect. Just what you'd expect at this sort of higher price point. The unit is a full metal build with the front faceplate mounted to an extrusion sort of style backing. And this extrusion style backing allows it to connect to a whole heap of other Switcho products. Or it can be removed, like this front faceplate can just be completely removed to fit into an integrated dash setup, just like what you've probably already seen as part of this video. The markings and the text along the front are very precise and clear, although I feel it would have been nice to have some of it, if not all of it, backlit. Is it an actual issue? Not really. Unless you're simming in the pitch black, I don't think it will really affect you. The screen is super clear and sharp, but it's also overly reflective. Now, I don't know if you can see that, as I've got some front lights here on the desk. You may be able to see that reflecting there. But during using it, when I was on my sim, it really never bothered me too much. The screen itself is bright enough to overcome any of the lighting I had in the sim room in that particular setup. But if you sim anywhere with a really bright backlight, like a window or like in a living room or something like that, this could be an issue. The build quality, fit and finish of the Switcho Radios overall, it's pretty immaculate. It feels like much of the other Virtual Fly gear. I can imagine it will last a very long time. Highlights of the build quality would have to be these rotary knobs. These things feel like the real deal. Full metal knobs with some nice muted click to the turn. And the push function also requires a bit of effort, so you're not going to accidentally nudge these. I can't fault the build quality in any way. It's typical Virtual Fly, but this also rings true for the price. You're looking at €895, which I think is around 960 USD. I think for most people, it's undeniably expensive, but its value depends on how you use it. I think you have to look at what it can actually do and how that relates to your interests in the flight simulator. For example, let's say you have no interest in using ATC, whether that's VATSIM, Pilot Edge, Say Intentions, or what was the other one called? Beyond ATC. If those are of no interest to you, then yeah, I would consider this an expensive purchase, because you'd basically just be buying it for the autopilot and probably the screen and annunciator panel alone. But if you are into that, and that's where you want to take your flight simulation, then it's a very strong grounding point as to why this might make a good purchase. Because the radios coupled with the autopilot panel, those two things together are the main selling point. Then you look at the inclusion of the built-in audio panel and the annunciator. Both of these are definitely icing on the cake, but the cherry on top is the flaps and the trim indicators. Taking in the whole scope here, this little unit is doing a lot. Then there's the optional upgrade for the E version, which is like another €60 or thereabouts. So when it comes to value, yes, 950 USD is a lot of money, and I would say not worth it if you don't heavily use ATC services and the autopilot functions. But if you do use these services and then layer on top of that all those little extras that you get, which some of them are really useful, I do rate this as a complete unit. It will make fiddling around with your mouse trying to turn those bloody knobs inside the cockpit a thing of the past. Well, mostly. But I feel only the sim pilots that are in deep will find the true value. Pros and cons time. Pros first. Super high build quality, a huge array of features and functions. It's nicely laid out and easy to understand. The software is an absolute breeze. Both the comms panel and the autopilot panel can also be used in larger jets as well as the GA or light aircraft. And now the cons. The price is an obvious one, but that doesn't represent the value for the right type of simmer. And secondly, I would love to have seen some backlighting on here. Taking it all into consideration, Virtual Fly have created something pretty unique here. A lot of different functions and systems come together in a well laid out package with super strong and detailed build quality. Couple that with the plug and play functionality of what could have been considered highly technical and potentially confusing controls, Virtual Fly have put it together in a way that mostly anyone can get up and running in minutes. I do rate this quite highly for that, but it's only for the simmer that will make use of the broad range of functions that the Switcho Radios offers. This is where the value lies. If you'll use the comms and the nav radios and the autopilot, then the value is there. And all those other things are just the icing on the cake.